Hello and welcome to the shop. I'm Jared and this is the Questionable Garage. And sitting in front of me is a car I had no expectations of working on again. If you're not familiar with this is a 1966 Chrysler New Yorker. It came equipped with basically the best factory option without being a high performance big block. It's got a 440 cubic inch engine, higher compression, and it just was an amazing drivetrain. And I've got that really awesome 1970 Sport Satellite that needed a drivetrain. So I bought this car just to rip it all apart, but wanting to give it a proper send-off before it goes off to Valhalla, I took it on a road trip with my good friend Henry, and then fell in love with the car, and I was pretty much crucified in the comments about ripping this thing apart, which you are right. It's made it through Power Tour twice. It almost made it through a 4,500 mile road trip with me. It did get Henry and I to Vegas. We finally finished a rally together on the Dust Ball, but on my trip home, I had a catastrophic wheel bearing failure. I had just fully serviced these things. They were good, but that outer bearing is completely exploded. Well, off camera, I replaced that wheel bearing, that whole spindle. We are good. It is driving down the road. But the biggest glaring problem, aside from, the air conditioning not working and heater not working, the power windows not always wanting to go up and down when it was an appropriate time, was the carburetor. It just, granted on the trip, we went through about 10,000 feet of elevation changes. It just did not work very well. Now back in a static position, I've tried making it run right, and it wouldn't do it. I've got misfires, the fuel pump's good, we know fuel's going in there. I put an entire brand new ignition system in it, and it's just not been very fun to drive. But then a really, really amazing opportunity came along, and we're going to get to install the latest and greatest of bolt-on fuel injection on our 1966 Chrysler New Yorker, thanks to Holley. But before we even get to talk about the new parts, we need to go ahead and pull the Demon carburetor off of it. So let's go ahead and get that done, and then we're gonna go over to the table and talk a little bit about these new products, which I'm pretty excited about, so. Well, as you can tell, it just took a single pair of pliers to go ahead and get that Demon carburetor pulled off of our New Yorker. And that is where I am incredibly excited. We have 4 different versions of fuel injection and delivery sitting on this table in front of us, including an unreleased product. Well, it was unreleased until the day you're watching this video, and it is now available for purchase. Now, an engine at its simplest form is an air pump. It takes air in, pushes air out, and we demonstrated that quite well in the Ferrari Holley episode where we pulled the air cleaner off and it was able to pull in a lot more air and pull air in more efficiently, and it made more horsepower because of it. So along the same vein, an engine goes up and down, the valves open and close, it pulls air in, it then will compress that air, and in order for anything fun to happen, like an explosion in horsepower, you have to inject fuel and have a spark in order for it to run. So it is the job of the carburetor or fuel injection systems to deliver that fuel to have the explosions, horsepower, and all of the fun. So the simplest way to look at the earlier fuel delivery process, the carburetor, is it is a very specifically controlled fuel leak. And the reason I say that is that it uses Venturi's principle, the air moving across a specific controlled air passage through actual what they call Venturi's to speed up and slow down air across a specific passage with a very controlled size hole to draw that fuel in. It works phenomenal, and when it comes to peak horsepower, no matter how much someone is going to try to argue and claim fuel injection makes the most power, for maximum top full throttle horsepower, carburetors are king because they give an extra little benefit called the latent evaporation of the fuel. As that fuel goes from liquid to air, pulls more heat out, Gives you a cooler combustion charge, which lets you make a little more horsepower. But most people in the modern world worry about what's called power under the curve. We don't always drive full throttle. Okay, we maybe mostly drive full throttle, but a lot of the times we are at part throttle, cruising, going away slowly from a traffic light. That is what's called under the curve, under peak horsepower, and fuel injection really becomes king there. The other thing you run into, like we did pretty substantially when we were on the rally with our New Yorker, is the massive elevation changes. We were at sea level, we were at almost 10,000 feet above sea level. When it comes to a carburetor, as that is happening and you're going up and down, the amount of available oxygen changes. So to run correctly, you then have to actually change the metering jets, valves, the different parts inside the carburetor to compensate for that. Whereas with modern fuel injection, they use what's called a barometric sensor to measure the relative atmosphere pressure around it, and it makes corrections automatically for you. So there's no worry as far as taking your carburetors apart to rejet them so you can run better, higher and lower. So carburetors work incredibly well. They've been around since the very beginning of the engine. It is a simple, reliable way to deliver fuel. And I will say ultimately my goal here is to provide just the scratch at the surface. If you guys get really curious and want to dive into more information, Smarter Every Day did a really good video where they actually built a clear carburetor so you can see how some of that worked and how fuel is delivered through it. There's also fantastic resources even on the Holley website that explains metering and jetting, the acceleration pumps. It goes through all of that, that gets you that full scratch. I want to make you curious. They're going to fulfill that curiosity if you want to go for a little bit more, which we desperately need. We need more hot rodders, we need more gearheads, and we need more technicians. So hopefully you get excited. But let's go ahead and talk about everything in front of us. We have just the absolute tried and true Holley 650 4-barrel double pumper vacuum secondary carburetor. This thing is a brute. They are hefty. It's got 2 float bowls, so the way the carburetor will work is you have a reservoir on fuel on each side, so that way as you're driving along you don't have to rely on the pulses of the mechanical fuel pump. Fuel is there, it is always there ready to go, and then you have metering blocks on each side where you can change the specific jets for the fueling requirements of your engine. You also have accelerator pumps. The reason you have that is what's called lean tip-in. When you first rapidly press the accelerator pedal, the fuel takes a second to actually pull the fuel out of the jets, so you get a direct squirt of gasoline to help compensate for it. Now you also have that with throttle body fuel injection or any type of fuel injection. It monitors the throttle position sensor change and will increase fuel delivery based on that requirement. That is just a process of the engine. When suddenly there's a quick change, you need a little extra fuel to compensate for it. Otherwise you get that kind of, familiar stumble. You kind of get that, and then the car, it will rev up. So you've got that. This is just old reliable, but it is heavy. Next up is our Demon carburetor. This is an all aluminum carburetor meant to be slightly affordable. It works pretty well. Its biggest downside, any metering, jet changes, anything like that, you pretty much have to fully take this carburetor apart. It is an all aluminum design, fairly lightweight, and it has what's called vacuum secondaries. When there's suddenly no vacuum, so when you go full throttle, there's no more restriction, so your engine doesn't develop intake manifold vacuum quite like it did before, and that will cause your secondaries to open up and have all 4 of your throttle blades getting air, whereas this older Holley is a mechanical secondary. Just when you romp the throttle, it opens them all. So again, good relative design. It's stepping up into the modern era. We've got full composites throughout it. Becomes very lightweight. Decent unit, but again, it's leaking gas all over me and everything. Good unit, but still, it's a pain to make changes to. Then we step up into the modern era. Now, it's funny saying modern era because we're talking about throttle body fuel injection, which you started to see in the 80s, but really has been perfected into a science, and it allows you to very easily bolt on and get a very modern running engine on all of these classics, to where you don't have to worry about changing metering rods, metering jets, anything. You're able to just have quick on the fly adjustments. So I did not have on hand a Holley Sniper. So this is a Holley Sniper 1, and what this does is it adds throttle body fuel injection. So built inside this unit, you have a computer, you have an intake air temperature sensor, and you have fuel injectors. Also on the 2-barrel version, you have a fuel pressure regulator. This is giving very modern fuel injection in a compact form factor that is very easy to bolt on and add to pretty much any engine. If you can bolt the carburetor on, you can handle installing a Sniper. Now, this was their first version of it. It sold for many years, has done incredibly well. I've used it. It does great in stock applications and some performance applications, but they wanted to make the best better. And that is where the Holley Sniper EFI 2 steps up to play. This is the Holley Sniper version 2, and I will say I am incredibly impressed with this unit. Just holding it in hand, one, it's very light. They've gone through and very aggressively tested this thing to make it the best bolt-on fuel injection. Sniper 2 was engineered with consumer feedback from Sniper 1. It's really impressive when you go through everything they've done to deliver the Sniper 2. This has been tested to the extreme. From what I understand, it's run for months straight to make sure it's gonna handle everything you're gonna throw at it. One of the big things just on aesthetic side that they changed is they've gone to a compact wiring. Everything comes out of the back in a simplified way, so you can very easily hide it. You're not gonna obviously have connectors coming out of it. It's gonna help you keep your classic looking classic. And they simplified the backside wiring. Instead of having multiple plugs, you have one plug for your main power input, output, and auxiliary controls. You have a coolant temperature plug, you have a wideband plug, and you have a new updated CAN interface plug for different types of either the handheld unit, a Bluetooth module, or you can go to a full integrated dash system that will all connect to the new updated CAN. Now, some of the other small improvements that we can talk about, they've got more options for your throttle linkage, transmission linkages. They redesigned kind of the whole geometry of your throttle setup, so that way you get a lot better pedal feel. Some of the earlier Sniper 1s, or even with some carburetors, depending on the geometry and where you end up taking your throttle cable, you can end up with like a pulsy or jerky feel. This is a nice linear feel, and it's better in every aspect. So rather than keep talking about it, let's cut to me going ahead and installing it. And while I'm doing that, we'll talk a little bit more about some of the upgrades that you get on a Sniper 2. Oh, Dwayne, it is hot in here. Gosh, it's miserable. Shows 102 degrees. I don't know how it gets so hot in here so quick.
Whenever you're converting one of these classic vehicles to fuel injection, you have several options for fuel pumps. You can use a simple inline system where you don't even have to pull the fuel tank. All you need to do is go inline to your current feed and use an external fuel pump. I wanted to use an internal fuel pump, which requires me to remove the fuel tank, and then once it's out, I've got the Holley Universal EFI module. It's a cast hat, it holds the fuel pump, it does everything that you need, but you do need to drill into your fuel tank. Anytime you are working on a fuel tank, consider it to be a bomb. It can be very dangerous if you do anything incorrectly. So, first step, you need to purge all of the fuel vapors. You can either fill it with water. What I do is open my welding tank and blast some CO2 through it. Just get an inert gas. If you don't have water and you don't have a welding tank, you can set it and let your exhaust run into it, provided your vehicle is not running too rich. Then follow the instructions on how to measure and set up your fuel pump module and get that installed. One of my favorite things about the Sniper is how easy it is for anyone to get fuel injection on their car. And they've made it even better with Sniper 2 by introducing a complete ecosystem. And when I say ecosystem, I mean you can get anything to fully modernize your classic. You're able to get plug-and-play distributors that give the computer full timing control. You're able to get adapter harnesses that make virtually everything plug-and-play. And what I love most about the ecosystem is it's optional. Go with the base, simple 4-wire hookup or add as many options as you want. The next generation ECU features improved RF noise and interference resistance. Now let's make this clear. The Sniper 2 is not just putting a new number behind the already #1 EFI conversion on the market. It is an entirely redesigned from the ground up unit. Now, also, when you're converting and adding fuel injection to your vehicle, you have a couple options. You can either run rubber hose front to back. I like to be extra, so I'm actually using some 3/8 copper nickel, easy to bend, hard line with very short rubber lengths front to back. One of the benefits of using copper nickel is it's very rust resistant. We use it pretty commonly for patching brake lines, fuel lines. It's easy to bend and works phenomenally. Now, when you're wiring your fuel pump, it's up to you if you want to run your ground all the way to the front. Generally speaking, these old vehicles have a lot of metal and are good grounding circuits, but again, because I'm extra, I ran a power and ground all the way up to the battery. One thing to take note, whenever you are wiring, twisting together and electrical tape are not correct. Get the right crimp connectors, get the right butt connectors that you can solder seal in, do a good job wiring. T-shirt coming soon, nothing is more permanent than temporary wiring that works. Take your time, do it once, do it right, so that way the fuel injection can work and you can get the hundreds and thousands and tens of thousands of miles of trouble-free driving, because the fuel injection can only work as good as the wiring you give it.
All right, we're kind of doing the hands thing here because I'm going to show you the Sniper here in a second. I went through and got pretty much all the wiring done. The one thing we don't have finished yet is I don't have the fuel pump connected to the Sniper wire. And the reason I have done that is traditionally you just use the Holley to trigger a relay. But from what I can tell looking at the instructions and based on the relay, I might be able to actually just drive the fuel pump off of this. It appears nothing else runs off of it. So we're waiting for confirmation, but to get it started, I can just connect the fuel pump directly. One thing I went ahead and did, you'll see in the time lapse, is I did pressurize the fuel system, made sure there were no leaks in any of our plumbing, set our fuel pressure to the 60 PSI that the Sniper is looking for, and it is now time, fingers crossed, I can connect that battery. We will not energize the fuel pump. I'm a fan of making sure you have your base map, all your settings done first before you run the fuel pump to it, just in case for whatever reason the injectors are going to hang open. So we are going to slide our ground on here. There we go. And we're going to turn the key on, and hopefully that handheld starts to wake up. Should be key on. It'll start waking up. Hey! Please run the wizard. Yes. Wizard. Wizard. We have a Sniper 2. We have 8 cylinders. Engine displacement, 440. Target idle speed, we're going to go with 730 for now. It is a strip style cam. You just tell it, it'll adjust. We've got no power adders. It is running, let me double check, I think CD box. Okay, so we are CD box, but we're not doing timing control. Start
So now it's creating and sending that map. We're gonna give it some fuel. Stay. And we're gonna hopefully have a 440 fire right up. There we go. That ain't too bad. It's learning the car really quick, getting things dialed in. Wondering, make sure to always just rev the heck out of the cold engine. So we're gonna let it warm up, but one thing we'll do once it's warmed up is we'll wanna decrease the idle air position a little bit. My goal is whenever an engine is warm, for it to only need 0 to 4% to idle. All right, as you can tell, I've got the car outside, and like I was saying, if you couldn't quite hear me while the car was running, I've got to run home and get our 2 Great Pyrenees outside before they turn yellow from being inside all day long, and we're gonna bring them to the shop so they can give us their first opinion of riding in the New Yorker. I will say this, from the 30 feet-ish that I've driven it, phenomenal. The computer has learned idle and free revving. It's not really had a chance to really adapt yet. And the car runs fantastic so far. So I'm really looking forward to it. We're gonna go on that first drive together in the morning. Incoming cheesy YouTube transition. We're gonna go for a drive. Yesterday we got it fired up, we fully installed the unit, and now, cold start, hasn't been driven at all. First impressions. Oh, I might actually like this car again. Give you an idea how hot it is, the coolant temperature is already 102. I'm sorry dogs, yes, we will need to get moving. Let's see how it drives cold. Because I agree with the dogs, it's too hot to not be moving around. Well, we've gotten a little bit of driving done, but I can say this, the initial cruising, it's so much better. The car still has to warm up and learn. It does some learning before certain temperature thresholds, but it really doesn't pick up until the engine is warm. And that's when it really needs to be, you know, you need the engine warm to do all of the proper learning and all of that good stuff. But it's getting better, it is learning, and the car is driving. Once it gets a little bit warmer, we'll find out if we finally have fixed that awful misfire that made it just unbearable to drive. So far, pure and Magny approved. We can go full throttle. We can go full throttle finally. Now, in the carburetor's defense, with enough fighting with it,
it would run right, but unfortunately the carb that was on the engine, you can't change jets and metering rods very easily. And why would I want to change jets and metering rods when I can bolt something on, connect 4 wires, and let the computer do it for me? I'm also going to say I've kind of had a love-hate relationship with this car. Just for whatever reason, it feels like it doesn't like me, no matter how much I've done to make it better. For once, the car appreciates something we gave it. What do you think, Farrah? It gets 3 slobbers of a... Oh my goodness, there's a lot of slobbers. Is that you or is that Magni behind me? Well, we're just gonna drive for a little bit, let it learn a little more, let me learn a little bit more about it, and then we'll go back to the shop. So, cue fun countryside time lapse with dogs enjoying a nice cruise. All right, we are back inside the shop. I just had the first drive in the New Yorker since owning it. That everything pretty much went well. I wasn't worried about a carburetor. I wasn't worried about it starting. It just drove nice. I enjoyed taking it on the drive with the dogs. It was just something it was a nice drive. Now, there are plenty of different bolt-on EFI conversion kits out there, but the Sniper has always been #1. They took all of that consumer feedback and brought out the Holley Sniper 2 EFI and just knocked it out of the park. Again, they have the entire ecosystem where you can get ignition, timing control, full vehicle wiring control with the power distribution modules, but I just wanted the basic, just the unit to show you if you can bolt the carburetor on and connect 4 wires, you can have really great fuel injection. You saw us go through that wizard yesterday. We answered a couple questions. I set my idle screw, and then we just drove it. Legitimately, the first time since owning the vehicle, I could go full throttle in the car. I'm over the moon. I'm really excited. I appreciate Holley having enough faith in me to send me one of their very early units and be part of the product launch. I'm really excited. My biggest thing is I don't want you guys to ever be afraid of wiring or fuel injection. Granted, the Ferrari project, that was pretty involved, but with good understanding, you can make it work in just about anything. Or you have a classic, you want to be able to take it on a cruise and just enjoy the car. You can do that too. It's really simple, really easy, and it's phenomenal. I'm looking forward to actually putting some more miles on this car. I am going to slowly work through and fix all of its problems. The car has quite a few of them, and once I finally get it to a point that I'm really happy, it's going to end up being one of your guys' cars. I don't need it in the fleet. I've got way too much money in it, so it's not practical to sell. So we'll give it away. That's end of the year, so when that time comes, when I'm done figuring out everything with the lawyers, we'll get into that and I will let you know how it can be yours when the time comes. But right now, we are done with the New Yorker. It runs and drives great thanks to the Sniper. If you want to learn more about the Sniper 2, I'll have a link in the description box below where you can head over to the Holley website, get the full details, and find the right one for your application, and get your car running like it's brand new, or a 1966 with modern fuel injection. That's as good as new, right? Sometimes it's even better than new. But appreciate you guys, as always, hanging out with us here in the shop. I'm Jared, reminding you guys to always make questionable choices and don't be afraid of wiring. It can be complicated, but it can also be simple. We'll see ya.